Bravecto side effects are something many pet parents only hear about after the first dose is already given. And the same is true for NexGard, Simparica, and other flea and tick medications. A lot of people are simply trying to answer one question: is Bravecto safe for my dog? You're told it's routine, widely prescribed, so you trust the process, you give it, your dog seems fine, and you move on. But here's what many pet parents are not told clearly. The FDA has issued a warning about neurologic adverse events in this class of drugs, and reactions are not always immediate. In some cases, symptoms can appear weeks or even months later. As Dr. Judy Morgan explains,
sometimes we get a delayed reaction, and sometimes we don't see a reaction until the second, third, or fourth dose is given. Once these chemicals are given, there's no antidote.
Now, before we go any further, this episode is not about fear. It is not about attacking veterinarians or telling you what to do. It's about informed consent, so you know exactly what to ask before anything goes into or onto your pet. I'm Charlie Pruden, co-founder of Podega and host of the Next Level Pet Parent podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Judy Morgan, an integrative veterinarian with over 40 years of clinical experience. She has reviewed FDA communications, adverse event reports, and early product testing data to help pet parents better understand both the benefits and the potential risks of common veterinary drugs. By the end of this episode, you'll have clarity on 3 important things. First, why side effects from flea and tick medication can be delayed even if your dog seemed fine at first. Second, which neurologic, digestive, and behavior changes pet parents most often miss in the weeks after dosing. And third, the informed consent questions to ask your vet before the next prescription. Stay with us until the end because Dr. Judy breaks down one detail from early product testing that helps explain why "my dog did fine last time" is not always the full story. Let's get into it. Dr. Judy, welcome to the podcast. I am so incredibly excited that you've joined us today for what I truly believe is an incredibly important conversation that not enough veterinarians and pet parents are having right now.
That's true. I wish we could have more veterinarians have this conversation.
You've been raising awareness about the flea and tick products and veterinary pharmaceuticals and informed pet parent making decisions for a very, very long time. And what I actually love about you and the content that you create is that you consistently point us back to the actual research that is being put out there, the FDA communications, the lawsuits even, and real-world data that helps us really understand the risks and side effects of popular veterinary drugs, just like the ones that we're talking about today. I think the big word of today is going to be informed consent, because it's very important that pet parents are being told the possible side effects that are related to these drugs that we're going to talk about today. So I think maybe just to make sure that we're all on the same page, let's start by defining what we mean when we say conventional flea and tick products. Or maybe you even prefer a different word rather than conventional flea and tick products?
Well, we can just call them neurotoxins because that's what they are. They're pesticides. We can't say insecticide because a flea is an insect, but ticks are arachnids. They're 8-legged creatures. So it's basically, these are chemical pesticides. It just amazes me that parents would really question feeding their children a pesticide orally or applying a topical pesticide on their children, yet it doesn't equate when we're talking about our pets. It's a sentient being that has the same neurologic system that we do, basically. Veterinarians are not warning pet parents of the potential side effects. And in fact, what I see in reports from pet parents very commonly is that the veterinarians are in total denial. No, there is no way that this pesticide that we gave to your pet is causing the neurologic problems that you're seeing. I don't understand how that denial can be there when the FDA has sent out a warning letter to every single veterinarian saying, hey, we notice that there seems to be some neurologic problems in certain pets with these pesticides. And weirdly, they still say in that letter, we consider these to be safe and effective. Well, they are pretty effective, although there are some reports of the products not working, but they're pretty effective at killing pests, fleas and ticks and Demodex mites. But they are also very effective in causing neurologic side effects and other side effects, bloody vomiting and diarrhea, and other nerve problems. So dry eye, because these chemicals can affect the nerves that are supplying the tear glands of the eyes. So it's not just one thing. One certain group of the isoxazoline class actually causes a lot of dermatologic problems as well. So itching and broken skin and red oozing sores. So there's a lot of different side effects, a lot of behavior changes that we see in pets
that are treated with these chemicals as well. So I think that's part of the problem is FDA sends out the warning, but the veterinarians are still in denial going, no, your dog had seizures 3 weeks after we gave the drug, can't possibly be related. Well, it can, because some of these chemicals that we're using as pesticides, and it goes beyond the isoxazoline class, there's a lot of chemical pesticides that are used on our pets.
They can have a lot of side effects, and they don't have to be instantaneous. I mean, yes, if you give, for instance, there's a lot of pesticide chemicals that are labeled for dogs that should not be used in cats because cats are so much more sensitive to them. And so a lot of times the cats will kind of have an almost instantaneous reaction within the first couple of hours of having a product applied or given, but it's not always that way. Sometimes we get a delayed reaction, and sometimes we don't see a reaction until the second, third, or fourth dose is given. They saw that even in the original testing. So Bravecto was the first one that came on the market as an isoxazoline. That's the 3-month chewable. It now comes in topicals and all kinds of other horrible combinations. But in the original product insert, it says on the original testing with dogs, there were dogs that suddenly died, suddenly had all kinds of problems. And they couldn't explain why it took 3 doses for these dogs to react. And so they just eliminated them from the study and said, well, we don't have an explanation, but here it is. Sorry, I would like to have an explanation. Like, what did we see there? Did the product not get cleared from their system? Did they have a toxic load in their system? We were never given that information. I don't think that, we should approve drugs that we don't have an explanation for why dogs suddenly drop dead.
I mean, you already mentioned the FDA warning that was put out on the isoxazoline product class of drugs, which includes Bravecto, NexGard, Simparica, Reproduction Plus. Did I forget anything else? Product that's considered
Credelio, but a lot of these products, they are in tablet form, but now they are also, the Bravecto is now in a 12-month injection.
Which, wow, that just floors me.
Yeah.
We have Simparica Trio, where it's being combined with other pesticides so that we can do heartworm prevention, intestinal parasite, and external parasite all in one dose. Yes, convenience. What pet parent doesn't love convenience? Everyone is busy. How bad am I going to have to feel if I opt for convenience and then my pet drops dead or has seizures for the rest of its life or can't walk in a straight line, walks like a drunk, has dry eye, and I have to treat the eyes 15 times a day. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong. And I don't think pet parents are aware. And so one of the things that I would love to raise awareness is that every single veterinarian should be discussing the potential side effects, what to watch for, or handing the clients a fact sheet about the product before it's given to the pet. And, not only are these chemicals given by veterinarians, they're given at shelters and rescues. So we adopted a Cocker Spaniel a few years ago. He was found as a stray. He's a blind dog walking around on the streets. And when he went to the shelter, they did the typical shelter thing. He got every single vaccine. He got a heartworm preventative, and he was given a pesticide. And so One, that's a lot to be done in one day to an older dog with who knows what background. My daughter adopted a dog from a shelter. He had been running stray around our farm. Somebody picked him up, turned him into the shelter, and she went to adopt him. He had been given that kind of the same cocktail of all those things. A few months later, he ended up back at the shelter through no fault of his own, different shelter in a different county, and
Got all of that again.
Wow.
And how many of these animals are just being slammed again and again? We're very lucky. That guy, he's got the constitution of a mountain lion. I mean, nothing affects him, thank goodness. But it's not a good way to treat our pets.
Yeah. A lot of times, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about like why veterinarians are not talking about these side effects in a little bit. But let's state the facts right now. So there are several manufacturers of these conventional flea and tick products that have faced class action lawsuits. So a lot of them were actually marketed as safe without really disclosing the potential risks. So in 2018, as you mentioned, the FDA put out a warning, and I would like to read off a direct quote from this FDA warning, which is the FDA is alerting pet owners and veterinarians of the potential for neurologic adverse events in dogs and cats when treated with drugs that are in the isoxazoline class. Isoxazoline products have been associated with neurologic adverse reactions, including muscle tremors, ataxia, and seizures in some dogs and cats. I would like to ask you as a veterinarian, Dr. Judy, what are your professional thoughts about this fact sheet, and why do you think the FDA felt it was important to issue this alert, even though these products remain widely prescribed for pet parents?
I think they got so many complaints that they couldn't ignore it any longer. And when we did the Project Jake survey and study of the side effects of pesticides, in particular the isoxazolines, but we covered all categories, we had a phone conversation with FDA and CVM, the Center for Veterinary Medicine. Kudos to them for actually scheduling a call with us. We had multiple veterinarians on the call. The owner of Jake that started the whole Project Jake study, we gave them the results of our research. They listened very well. They asked good questions. And so yay, because even getting that phone call with FDA is hard to do. They're slammed. They don't have enough time. They can't, they've got a lot that they're handling. But at the end of the call, which was about an hour and a half long, at the end of the call, after we presented all of our statistics, bar graphs and charts and, all this information, they said, thanks for your time. Thanks for doing this work. We don't think there's been enough complaints or enough adverse reactions to warrant anything further. Two things happened. They did put out this warning letter, and they made the companies put a warning on the packaging. So that was huge in itself. One of the biggest problems with this, though, is the pet owners never see the packaging. Very commonly, these products are handed out as a treat in the veterinary office. Oh, here, we can, give him flea and tick prevention. This will last 3 months. We'll see you back in 3 months. And they just hand the treat. And so the owners are never even seeing the packaging. They're not hearing the warnings. The topicals might be applied in the office. So I know that a lot of veterinary clinics, if you drop an animal off for a procedure or drop them off for the day for an exam or something to be done, they make you sign a release. And on the release, it says, if we find fleas or ticks on your pet, we will treat them. You have no idea what they are. We used to have that on our release form for admission into the hospital, except we were treating them with a natural essential oil spray. No problem. So if I see that, and actually, even if it's not on an admission form, when I take my pets in now, I write on the admission permission slip, no vaccines are to be given, no flea and tick chemicals are to be given or placed on my pet. And if they're there for a dental, I put on there no extractions without calling me first. It's really up to the pet owner to be very proactive. And frankly, it's up to the pet owner to educate themselves as to the potential for side effects. So one of the things that I tell my social media followers and my clients is, if anything is being prescribed for your pet, whether it's a pesticide, an antibiotic, a medication, always ask, what are the potential side effects of this particular product? And if they can't tell you right off the top of their head, look it up on your phone. We all have miniature computers that we walk around with. All you need to do is type into your search engine side effects of whatever the drug is. It'll come up instantly, and then you can have a conversation. It says, oh my gosh, this might cause gastric upset. This might cause dry eye. This might cause seizures. We should discuss that. How often is that seen? Have you ever seen it? Is that a problem? Should I be worried?
My pet has these other comorbidities, these other problems and health issues. Is this going to be a problem? Is it going to conflict with other medications that they're on? So it really is about being that next level pet parent, being informed and asking questions.
If you're listening and you're feeling overwhelmed, trying to figure out what's actually safe and effective when it comes to flea and tick protection for your dog, you're truly not alone. There's a lot of conflicting advice, and most pet parents just want clear, responsible guidance. That's exactly why we created our ultimate flea and tick protection guide. Inside, you'll find trusted expert insights on natural prevention, treatment options, and even science-based resources that break down potential side effects of common flea and tick treatments. It's all designed to help you think critically and make informed decisions for your dog. You can download it for free in the description below. And this episode is actually part of our flea and tick awareness series, where we're building this understanding step by step. If this episode has been helpful to you so far, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next conversation on this topic.
If you don't already have the answers,
Ask questions.
frankly, don't walk out with anything in your hand or anything being put into or onto your pet without having that conversation or looking it up yourself. It takes you 1 minute to do it. Make sure that you have those answers, because the last thing you want is to go home and all of a sudden your pet starts showing some weird symptoms that you've never seen before. And then you say, oh, could that be from whatever he was given? Now's not a good time for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for explaining that in such great details. Also, how to kind of already tell them up front what you don't want to do, because unfortunately, as pet parents, no, not unfortunately, but as pet parents, we are looking for someone to trust, and the veterinarians are the ones that we trust, and we think they know better than us, right? They're the professionals, but that doesn't remove the responsibility from ourselves to still do that double checking, to still the consent, the informed consent from us as pet parents before the vets do anything. That's so important. And it's really important for pet parents to know that they kind of have to say that upfront, not afterwards.
Once these chemicals are given, there's no antidote if they have side effects. The only thing you can do is treat symptomatically. So if you have a pet who's having seizures after these medications, the only thing that you could do is give them anti-seizure medication. And to one of our highlighted cases was a little Cocker Spaniel from Belgium, and he was given NexGard as a puppy when he went in for his puppy shots. And within a few days, he started having uncontrollable seizures. And his owner reported it to the Belgian equivalent of FDA, and their response was, wow, this is the first time we've ever heard of any side effects. Wow. Okay, so he was the first person who ever reported it, and the neurologist and the veterinarian, everybody was in denial that it was from the medication. This was pretty early on in the life of these. And Obi ended up having to be on 3 different anti-seizure medications. And his owner worked out a detox protocol. Great guy, did a ton of research, worked with Dr. Gene Dodds, with me, with Dr. Michael Fox, and ended up making a really great detox protocol. But it took over a year on that protocol before he could start weaning down any of the medications. And so we're out 3 years out from that initial problem, from 1 dose. And I think he's down to 1 anti-seizure medication, and he's growing into a beautiful dog. He's able to play and have a pretty normal life. But he's on anti-seizure medication, most likely for life. Jake, the dog that started the whole Project Jake survey, was a German Shepherd. He was a year old, beautiful dog. given a single dose of Bravecto, started to seizure, ended up in ICU for days, trying to get the seizures under control. A year or so later, he had a grand mal seizure. The owner couldn't get to him fast enough. He fell down a flight of stairs, shattered his front leg. This is where the class action lawsuit started, because she's had tens of thousands of dollars in veterinary bills, all based on her dog being given one dose of a pesticide that set his brain into a frenzy, and he still can't walk in a straight line. He walks like a drunk, and he's 4 or 5 years old now. So, this is a lifelong problem because one dose of a neurotoxin was given to a dog that reacted very poorly to it.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is we don't know, we cannot predict who is going to react and who isn't going to react. You're literally playing Russian roulette. And just because they've had 1 or 2 or 3 doses with no reaction doesn't mean that they won't react or have a problem on the 4th dose or the 5th dose. I got a call from a trainer who trains and supplies police dogs to police or law enforcement units around the country. And he trains a lot of dogs every year. And in the contract, when these dogs are put in these positions, he specifically states in there that the dogs are not allowed to be given these neurotoxic pesticides. The reason he did that is because he's had quite a few dogs that the people go outside the contract and they give it anyway because they're told it's safe. These dogs have incredible behavior changes, become very aggressive, become uncontrollable. And so then they can't be used for that job because they're not able to process the information and do what they need to do in a safe manner. And so this trainer is great. Any dog where they're having a problem, he takes them back and he tries to retrain them. But what he has found is that the dogs who kind of lost their mind because of these neurotoxic chemicals are not trainable. He cannot get them back into the program and back into work. And so most of them end up euthanized, which this is ridiculous to be. First of all, that's a lot of time, effort, and money spent training those dogs. Those dogs are really, really crucial part of search and rescue and law enforcement. And every one of those that we lose, we're losing thousands of hours of training, thousands of dollars put into them. And again, losing a sentient being because we gave them a neurotoxic chemical that just did not do well in their system.
Something that we hear a lot of pet parents say, like especially when we raise awareness about this topic all the time, and a lot of people think it's fear-mongering. A lot of people actually say, oh, my dog has never had a problem and my dog's been on this for 5 years already. Nothing will happen. Like, it's all fake, basically. What would you say to people that are convinced that it's all good because their dog's been fine for many years on these drugs?
And their dog may continue to be fine. Their dog may be one of those who doesn't have a problem with the processing of these chemicals. So the isoxazoline neurotoxins work by changing the GABA gates and glutamate gates for chloride moving in and out of neurons, nerve cells. So they work by causing hyperexcitability of the neurons. Well, just, you've got nerves firing willy-nilly. Yes, we get seizures, we get tremors, we get all these different things. We don't know why some pets are extremely sensitive to it and why others are not. And so I'm sure there's some genetics in there somewhere that have something to do with this. They looked at the MDR1 genes to see, is that part of the problem? It's not. And we've seen problems in all different breeds, sizes, and shapes and ages of dogs and cats. There's just no way to predict. So saying, well, he's been on it for years and has never had a problem, that's great for that particular animal. But let's say you get a second dog. That second dog. So Obi, the little cocker from Belgium, they bought 2 dogs at the same time. They bought a female cocker and a male cocker. They were both given the same drugs. Obi had a horrible reaction. The female never had a problem. How could we predict that one is going to have a problem? We can't. And that argument is no different than any of the other drugs that are on the market that cause problems. Apoquel, Librela, Silencia, Cytopoint, all of these chemicals that even antibiotics. So for instance, when I was in high school and college, I used to get sinus infections like 20 times a year. And they would always prescribe a sulfa drug. And I did fine with it for 20 years until 1 year I got prescribed the antibiotic and I had the worst allergic reaction. I broke out in hives. I had shortness of breath, a racing heart. My eyes swelled shut. It was horrible. As a matter of fact, when I went to work with my face all swollen, my eyes swollen shut, my client said, "Oh my gosh, does your husband beat you? Do we have to, report something?" And I'm like, "No, this is an allergic reaction." But I ended up in the hospital getting epinephrine injections and steroid injections. And so, yes, I took that drug with no problem for 20 years. And then all of a sudden, boy, was there a problem. My body said, "We're not doing this anymore."
Any drug can do that, whether it's an antibiotic, a monoclonal antibody, or a neurotoxin. We cannot predict
when the problem will occur. So I am not willing to play that game with my own pets. I've got a dog with hydrocephalus. He's already got neurologic problems. Why would I give him a neurotoxin? To me, it's not worth the risk because there's so many things that we can do from a more natural standpoint, from a, not having to play this game. We need to look back at what's been done for thousands of years with food and herbs and natural minerals and so many things. Plants on this earth work so well. And, where do pharmaceuticals come from? They analyze something from nature and they isolate one chemical piece of that plant. And they say, "Oh, well, this particular chemical in this plant causes, kills pests or, helps with arthritis or does whatever." And so they take that isolate and then they make that into a synthetic chemical drug. And so now with AI and pharmaceutical modeling and all that kind of stuff, they can do this even faster. That's great. But what we have gotten away from is the sum of the parts is greater than any individual piece. So why do we do this? The pharmaceutical companies do it because they can monetize it.
It's hard to monetize that herb, but you can isolate the one chemical compound out of there and make that into a drug that you can charge a lot of money for. The argument from the pharmaceutical companies and even from FDA is, well, millions of doses have been sold. Tens of millions of doses have been sold.
We only have 200,000 reports of problems. Do the math. That's like 0.01% or something have a problem. That's pretty low. Okay, I can see why they're not pulling it off because, millions of animals do fine with it until they don't. I'm not willing to play that game with my animals.
And also going back to people who say, their dogs has been fine for 5 years on this drug. That doesn't mean, just like you said just now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be fine going forward because there's also some type of accumulative effect, right, on these drugs?
That is a good question. We don't really know. Like I said, in the original studies, they had a couple of dogs that suddenly died on month 3. And was there some reason why their body wasn't bearing the drug? Was there some reason why they suddenly had a toxic overload? Never got an answer, so we don't know. If you look at the half-life of the drugs, like when it should be out of the body, yes, should be out of the body. I mean, that's how they decide, give this one once a month. You give this one every 3 months because that's how long it takes for it to be out of the body. But I have had people tell me they gave a dose of Bravecto that's supposed to last for 3 months, and a year later, they're still finding dead ticks on their pet. So there's still got to be some residual in there. The ticks are still dying when they attach because that's not a normal occurrence.
Mm-hmm. You were actually part of a survey that was looking at real-world dog owner experience with flea and tick drugs like Bravecto, NexGard, and Simparica. And the survey found that 66.6% of those that received a parasiticide reported some type of adverse event. Can you tell us a little bit more about this survey, and particular about the findings that you've had across the survey?
It was really interesting, and I think we were even a little shocked. And it was not just on isoxazoline. So it was a pesticide survey. We basically took people through a list of questions where it said, have you used any parasite prevention on your pet? Yes, no. If you said no, then, you're done. If you said yes, then it was, what products have you used? And it was not just isoxazolines that we listed. We did a lot of the Piperno products, Moxidec, like a lot of different products. shocking how many were using the isoxazoline products, but we also had other products that showed up as well. And then that statistic of 2/3 of the animals having some sort of an adverse event, it was really across the board with all the different chemicals. Isoxazolines were at the top of the list for some of the worst problems as far as death and seizures and neurologic side effects. We saw side effects, for instance, a lot of the topicals, a lot of the animals would have burns on the skin or irritation, or even in some that they end up with tumor from having topicals applied in the same place in month after month after month. It was a little bit shocking, actually, to find out that 2/3 of the animals are having reactions no matter what chemical is used on them. We know that FDA clearly is not getting reports pushing 2/3 of the users. Otherwise, they would have a lot more reports and they would probably be more proactive about it. But instead, they're saying, oh, no, we only have 200,000 reports and there's, 30 million doses that have been used. So, statistically not important, which frankly, in my household, one reaction is statistically over the top. So, and again, this survey was put together by this group. It was started by Valerie, the owner of Jake, who had the horrible reactions, but she got Dr. Jean Dodds involved, she got me, and then we had a statistician and scientific writer. So we had a really good group of people to look at it and decide what was statistically significant and what wasn't. But it was really shocking. And the side effects ran the gamut. So vomiting and diarrhea, neurologic side effects, skin issues, tons of different things that were seen. I would say that probably 90% of those didn't get reported to the veterinarian, didn't get reported to FDA, didn't get reported to the manufacturer. And if they were reported to the veterinarian, a lot of times they either discount it and say it wasn't related to that, or they discount it and say, well, it only lasted for a couple of days, no big deal, it's fine. I think that's where a lot of the problem lies, that not enough of it gets reported to the veterinarians, to the FDA, to the companies. You have to fulfill all those requirements in order for it to be counted as an adverse event.
Thank you so much for going in depth with that, because I think it is really crazy to see what an actual survey of pet parents says versus what the official kind of sources say. So there's a really big disconnect. And like you said, it's because only a fraction of adverse events actually get reported to regulatory systems like the FDA. So based on your experience, why do you think that these events don't get reported and don't make it to the FDA, even when pet parents strongly see a strong connection between what they're seeing in their pet and what they've just given?
Well, that is a really interesting question, and I had to do research on this for a different drug that has been in the news recently, the Lorella and Silencia. What we found when we looked is that there are many tens of thousands more reports to the European Medical Agency than there are to the FDA.
Wow.
And that is because in Europe, it's mandatory for the veterinarians to report adverse events, whereas in the US, it is not. And it's very difficult to navigate the system of the FDA. They put these links up and act like it's easy to report an adverse event. It is not. And so veterinarians are busy. They don't want to take the time. First, they may be in denial that it even is an adverse event related to whatever was given. Second, they don't want to take the time out to report it to FDA and to report it to the drug company. It takes time, and you have to go through a bunch of red tape. And again, they will be in denial and make your life a little bit difficult, particularly the pharmaceutical companies. So for instance, I had a family that took their 3 dogs to a vaccine clinic. The dogs were given a whole bunch of vaccines and they were given Bravecto. 2 out of 3 dogs are now having seizures. So they came to me. I said, okay, we have to report this. We have to report it to FDA and we have to report it to the drug manufacturer. They did their part, jumped through a lot of hoops, and I did my part and jumped through a lot of hoops. And what we got was the manufacturer of the pesticide
Blamed it on the vaccines.
The vaccine companies blamed it on the pesticide. Neither of them wanted to write an adverse event report because they did not want to take responsibility for it. And then the FDA said, well, given 5 vaccines and they were given the pesticide. So there's no way for us to know which one caused it. So nobody wants to write up a report. And I mean, could it have been 5 vaccines given at the same time made the dog seizure? Sure. Could it have been a combination of 5 vaccines and a chemical pesticide? Sure. But, every one of those companies, and, when they're given 5 vaccines, you have to call every single vaccine manufacturer because they don't all come from the same place. So who has time to do this? Who wants to report all of this? I did it because I knew it was important to do. And the pet owner did it because they knew it was important to do. Once I pointed that out to them, most of it doesn't get reported. So if we had a system in the US, like they have in Europe, where the veterinarians were bound to do the reporting, we'd get a lot more reporting. Although we still would have to get over the hump of them being in denial of it causing it. And, when you make the report, it's not, hey, the Bravecto caused my dog to have a seizure. It's, I gave Bravecto.
And 24 hours later, my dog started having seizures.
That's the report. They're not going to write it up as it caused it. They're going to write it up as we have a report of a dog having a seizure or a bloody vomiting and diarrhea. And, they'll take all the information, the age, the sex, the weight, the treat, all that kind of stuff. So you have all that. It'd be really nice. I mean, now that you have AI, I'm not an AI fan, but, this is the kind of stuff where we could feed all that information in from 20,000 reports and say, what do we see as common denominators? Is there a breed predisposition, an age predisposition, a weight predisposition? What can we see as a commonality here where maybe we could be a little more
careful about who the chemicals are given to?
Maybe there are certain breeds that are hypersensitive. I haven't personally seen that in the reports that I've gotten. I get hundreds of reports, not thousands of reports. So, I think if we could feed all this information in, maybe we get a little closer to knowing what the problem is and why some react and why some don't.
Absolutely. I think something that's very important also, you mentioned it earlier already, but a lot of these reactions that are happening from these germs, they're not always happening within the first 24 hours. So something that we actually do at Podega when someone messages us like, my dog has diarrhea, for example, we often ask them questions. And one of the questions will be, when's the last time that your dog had flea and tick prevention or vaccinations? And we see like how far back that was. And a lot of times it was within the last 30 days when they make claims like that. So most pet parents won't connect the dots because most pet parents get these drugs from their vets and they are not informed about these adverse reactions. So I think it just makes everything so complicated with the reporting of these adverse events. Just basically the fact that these drugs stay in the system for 30 or 90 or, like you said earlier, even 12 months. And how are we going to prove that, right? Or I think just pet parents need to be aware of this is the case a lot of times, that these drugs can have adverse reactions within months, even after. Maybe note down on a lot more like what we've done with our dogs when symptoms show up. So if a pet parent suspects that their animal is experiencing an adverse event from a flea and tick product, what steps do you think they should take to gather information or maybe even report it themselves if we can't necessarily rely on our veterinarian for that?
Yeah, so the FDA fact sheet for pet owners and veterinarians actually has the contact information for each of the manufacturers, and they have a link for reporting adverse events to the FDA.
Links to be able to do that. It's not fun, it's not easy, and they probably are going to try to make the pet owner, particularly the drug companies, are going to try to make the pet owner feel foolish. They're going to try to convince you that it's not related and that you don't have grounds for making that report. Stick to your guns, make the report anyway, and ask them to send you a copy of the report that they wrote up. And it's really interesting, any report that is made to a manufacturer is supposed to be sent to the FDA. The FDA is supposed to have access to those records, but we do have information that a lot of those are not sent. The same thing with pet food complaints about anything. A lot of times those are filed in a file drawer somewhere at the company and never make their way to FDA. Shocking. So that's why it's really important to report to FDA as well, even though it's very difficult.
Thank you so much for explaining that. I think if these adverse reactions can be more reported, then hopefully in the future there will be more regulations about these products, and hopefully more pet parents and pets don't have to go through this. I would really like to know, why do you think veterinarians are kind of not acknowledging these adverse reactions, or why are they not telling the pet parents about these adverse reactions before? What is the hesitation?
I give you a couple of things. One, the drug rep and the drug companies tell you how safe these products are. No problems, nothing to see here. These drug companies spend a fortune in advertising and in sponsoring. So I was just recently at the largest veterinary conference in the world down in Florida. From the time you hit the parking lot and enter the front doors, every post in the main lobby had
a huge advertisement for Credelio.
And I know from holding our own events, to wrap one of those posts is about $20,000 to $30,000. And they had every post in that lobby wrapped. The windows had clings on them with these products, how safe they are. I think it's Merck makes the new Bravecto a month injectable, which I think is one of the worst things we've ever come up with. They were handing out the reusable grocery bags, tote bags, that had a big advertisement for the Bravecto 12-month injectable on it. And so there's thousands of that being
carried around the event, going home with these people, being carried to their grocery store. They're literally a freaking walking advertisement everywhere they go.
And so these companies are spending millions and millions of dollars to influence. And I mean, people get paid to be influencers now. But these companies are spending millions of dollars to influence veterinarians. Here are free doses for all of your own pets, free doses for your staff, this huge, big pharma influence. And so the veterinarians are like, well, geez, they just treated me to a really nice steak dinner. They gave me a bottle of wine. They gave me all these freebies. They literally, the vet conferences cracked me up because I used to be the same way when I was young. You go and you literally have to bring 2 empty suitcases with you to take home all the freebies that everybody gets out. And at the big pharma and big pet food booths, they'll be giving away something like a fanny pack or these, bags or, something silly. And people, the veterinarians, will stand hundreds of people in a line to listen to the spiel to get that freebie. So it's huge, huge influence. And during those little 5-minute lectures, they're told the safety record of these products is just amazing and we're not seeing problems, and don't listen to all that social media stuff. If you have enough positive imaging bombarding your brain from the pharmaceutical world, then a client comes in and says, oh my gosh, my pet has a problem. They're like, what are you talking about? We never see problems with this.
And it's really interesting. I can walk into
a vet clinic, a traditional clinic, and say, how many problems or side effects are you seeing? And I can list a long list of drugs. And, we haven't seen any reactions to any of those. And I'm telling you that that's impossible. That means you're not looking.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a very interesting take on that. I'm wondering, how do you think that a pet parent that might be listening right now, they might, not want to do these conventional flea and tick treatments anymore with their dogs because they now know about the side effect? How can they have a conversation with that next time they're at their vet's office? How can they have a conversation with their vet about this if their vet asks, what are you using for flea and ticks? Natural things don't work. You need something more effective.
It's interesting. I just had a conversation with a woman from Texas yesterday. Exactly this. Because I was going through her records from her vet, and the vet kept pushing Bravecto every time she was in, and she was in a lot. And she kept saying no, and she kept saying no, and she kept saying no. And so when I was talking to her yesterday, I said, so how did that conversation go? She said, every time I go, they give me the big spiel about how safe it is and how wonderful it is. Dogs, and there's no way I'm going to be able to solve the flea problem. She didn't have a big flea problem. She was seeing a flea here and there. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to solve it if I don't use these chemicals. And she just kept saying, no, her dog has a neurologic problem. So she said, why wouldn't I give a neurotoxin to my dog with a neurologic problem? So she kept saying no and kept saying no. And she went through a lot of different natural products, finally found the one that worked best for her in her area. And she's treating her yard and treating the pets and the house, which is, that's part of the problem. Everybody just wants to give a chemical to the pet and think that will solve the problem. Problem with fleas in particular is only 5% of the life cycle is actually spent on your pet. If you have a flea problem and the only thing you ever do is treat the pet and bombard your pet with chemicals, you've missed 95% of the problem. You've got to treat the environment. So that's the house and the yard. I mean, I've even had people have had to treat their cars because their cars get infested when they take an infested animal in it. So you got to treat that environmental factor. Well, an oral isoxazoline is not treating the environmental factor. The other problem is that we're only killing that one part of the life cycle, and the flea has to bite, flea or tick, has to bite your animal in order to ingest the chemical. So how is that helping prevent, tapeworms that we get from fleas or tick-borne diseases if your animal has to get bitten in order for the pests to die? That doesn't help if you have a pet with flea allergic dermatitis. The whole point of flea allergic dermatitis is one bite. They're allergic to the saliva from the flea. One bite is going to make them itch for 3 weeks. So if all the fleas in Texas have to bite your dog in order to die, that's not solving your allergic dermatitis problem. So we need to look at ways to repel these pests from our animals and ways to keep them out of the environment safely without, putting something toxic on our lawn. That's one of the other problems that we see with these chemicals is there are amazing studies coming out of Europe showing how these chemicals, isoxazoline, spironolactone, all these different chemicals, persist in the environment. They're persisting in the feces of the animals. They actually are coming out of the skin and off the skin. All of the rivers in Europe are highly contaminated with fipronil, and they're blaming it on the topical products that are being used on the dogs that are then swimming in the rivers. They tested the hair of French children, and their hair is loaded with fipronil, which is a pesticide. Why would French children have pesticides in their hair, and why would we want our children to be exposed to these pesticides? There was a great study where they took 3 dogs. One was given no flea tick chemicals. The second one was given an oral isoxazoline, and the third one was given a topical fipronil. The 3 dogs were then put into a wading pool. So not even fully submerged. They were put in a wading pool for 3 minutes together.
They tested the 3 dogs afterwards. All 3 of them had the isoxazoline and the fipronil
in their systems just from being in that close contact in that water, and the water tested positive. So why do we want to expose our families to neurotoxins? I don't want my granddaughter to have fipronil in her hair and isoxazolines showing up in her urine. No. It's dangerous for our environment. So if these pesticides are in the stool of our dogs and cats, and that's out in our yard, then all of the insects like the dung beetles and things that are interacting with that, we're killing them. So years ago, some genius came up with the idea that, there's too much malaria over in Africa and other countries. And if we gave 25% of the human population an isoxazoline to take orally, that would kill enough mosquitoes that the malaria problem would no longer be a problem. First of all, I don't know how they decide which 25% of the population gets to take the neurotoxin. And second of all, what about all of the birds and animals that eat mosquitoes to stay alive? This is fooling with Mother Nature to an extent where we're going to have die-off of multiple species. It's sort of like, out in Yellowstone when they got rid of all the wolves and the ecosystem changed dramatically. And then when they brought the wolves back and reintroduced them, it changed back for the better. You can't eliminate a species, even if it's mosquitoes, which who likes mosquitoes, but there are birds and frogs and things that eat mosquitoes. Why would we want to wipe out a population. It's so counterintuitive.
Thank you so much for bringing up the environmental aspect of it. There's a lot of research coming out surrounding that, but also going back to how dangerous it actually also is for our families. There was a peer-reviewed study published in 2025, last year, that examined household insecticides exposure, including the products that we use on our pets. They were studying that exposure during pregnancy and early childhood, and the study reported associations with certain flea and tick product exposures and a lower cognitive and adaptive behavior in specific groups of children. There is absolutely a connection and a risk for everyone in the household that is in contact with pets that take these drugs. So it's just, I don't know. I feel like it's a matter of time until something's actually gonna happen regulatory wise. I hope so. But I feel like now that research is coming out that is showing the risk for our families as well, hopefully they're going to take it more serious.
We can hope. I mean, look how long it took. We used DDT.
You're younger than me, so you're not going to remember this, but it wasn't until Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring back in the early to mid 70s that blew the lid off of the problems that DDT was causing with, childbirth abnormalities and, just poisoning our environment. So, it's sort of one of those you don't know until you do know. And then when you do know, how can you ignore it? And I think that we know until we can get the overreaching influence of big pharma out of our regulatory agencies, we're not going to see big change. And I'm really hoping that in the near future, we will see less big pharma influence, and we're just getting big pharma commercials off TV, which, they're talking about banning. I think New Zealand doesn't allow pharmaceutical commercials on TV. My big wonder with this, and I say it every time I see a pharmaceutical commercial, and I don't watch very much TV, I'll see commercials for Bravecto and NexGard and Cordelio and all these chemicals. I'm like, okay, so if we ban pharmaceutical commercials for people, is that going to include these pharmaceutical commercials for the animals? Because I would love to see that go away, because they make it sound so good. And that's why the pet owners come marching into the veterinary office and say, oh my gosh, this guarantees I won't have any fleas and ticks. Could you give me that really easy thing? Oh, and just hit it with that shot that's going to last for 12 months. Here's the thing, folks. You give them that injection, it's in there for 12 months. You can't get it back out. So if they start having a seizure the next day, or they're, wobbling, vomiting, diarrhea, you can't get it out. There's no antidote. So always think twice before you give something by injection or by mouth that has a long life inside the body, because we can't take it out, and we don't have an antidote. There's nothing we can do except for support them and treat them symptomatically. And that's a very hard lesson to learn, emotionally very hard on you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I feel important as well to mention is that I think a lot of pets are being treated with these flea and tick products when in reality they aren't even exposed to fleas and ticks on a regular basis. I think even house cats sometimes are treated with that, which is absolutely crazy.
There's a veterinary campaign that goes something like every pet, every month, all year round. And so my mother brought this home to me 20 years ago. When I came home from the vet clinic one day, she said, oh, next time you come back from the clinic, I need you to bring me, another 6-pack of the topical flea and tick product and another 6-pack of the heartworm prevention. And, it was when I was first learning about the side effects and problems of all this. And I said, Mom, have you ever seen fleas and ticks on, do you have fleas and ticks? She's like, no, I've never seen any on her, and I don't want to. And that's when the light bulb went off over my head, and I said, oh my gosh, she thinks this repels them. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, this stuff doesn't repel. It only kills them after they get on your dog. So if you've never seen fleas and you've never seen ticks, you don't have a flea and tick problem. Why would you use a chemical? You don't even have exposure. So when I see, little teeny tiny pocket pets, dogs, people carry in their pocketbook,
who live in a high rise in the city and their feet literally never touch the ground, why would we be giving them a monthly neurotoxin? They have zero exposure.
I don't use these chemicals on my barn cats. They're outside all the time. They have lots of chances to be exposed. But I'll be darned if I'm going to give him a neurotoxin, like the healthiest animals in the world doing their, cat thing. There's no way I would do that.
Yeah, same. We lived in Dubai for a really long time and we've never had a problem with fleas or ticks. And we've never used any of these chemicals for Milka as well. But I know so many people living in that area that did month over month, even though there wasn't any problem. And sure, some dogs are more prone maybe to attract ticks and things like that. But when we visited Thailand last year with Milka, Milka had a lot of ticks, unfortunately, when we were like in the islands and stuff where it was just a really big problem. I still would not go anywhere near that, like we've managed in other ways. But it just made me realize last year, like, wow, like, so many people just use these treatments, even though it's just not a problem where they live. And something else that I think is a big problem as well is that many people will say, oh, my daycare requires me to use these flea and tick treatments. And what would you say to that?
We've been doing a lot of work with John Sarber of Gyms for Dogs, and he designs really high-end dog parks and supplies equipment for them. And so he took us to see some really nice dog parks because being a typical veterinarian, I'm like, I hate dog parks, but really nice ones are really nice, and the dogs have a great time. But so many of them that we visited have a list of requirements, including vaccine requirements. They're not accepting kiters, flea and tick treatment. I mean, there are some countries, if you want to bring your dog into the country, they have to be treated with a chemical product for tapeworms, fleas, and ticks before they can come into the country. For me, I'd be like, unless I absolutely had 100% reason why my dog had to go with me, I would not subject to it. What we need to do is we need to do a better job educating these daycares, dog parks, groomers, veterinary hospitals. We need to do a better job educating them that natural products can work and do a great job without the side effects. Our dog doesn't have a problem. It hasn't been exposed. Please feel free to check my dog over if you find fleas and ticks all week. But it's being able to have a conversation and also trying to help educate them, letting, give them the FDA fact sheet that says, hey, by the way, these are neurotoxins.
And, it's a matter of education.
It's really interesting because John, the dog park guy, he goes to a lot of dog parks. He actually has put big signs up in all the dog parks talking about this and giving people signs to watch for. And he said, you can just see it. You know which dogs are on chemicals and which dogs aren't. The ones that are not on chemicals and they're not over vaccinated, these are the healthy dogs that are playing. They have no symptoms of any problems. The dogs that are on chemicals, they're being over vaccinated, they're doing all that stuff. These dogs are drooling profusely. Their tongues are bright red. They're chewing their paws. Their coats don't look as good. And John always plays dumb. He'll walk up to somebody in the dog park whose dog is showing some of these symptoms, and he'll just start a conversation with them. Oh, do you use flea and tick products for your dog? What one do you use? And, once they say what they're using, then he starts the spiel of, your dog's showing all these symptoms. And it's great to have somebody out there, on the ground educating people. And he's just a layperson. He's not a veterinarian, but he's been to so many dog parks and seen so many dogs. And so he knows what to watch for now and what he sees. And so again, we've got to do a better job educating. When I had my clinics in New Jersey, we educated all of the boarding facilities, daycare facilities, grooming facilities on the benefits of doing titers and not over vaccinating, and the benefits of avoiding the chemical flea and tick. We managed to get almost all of them to change their requirements, but it's just a matter of getting in there and talking to people. So if you're one of those pet parents who has to do all of that, then it's time to start educating the owners. Just bring them some resources, bring them the FDA fact sheet. A lot of my books talk about this. I've got a ton on drjudymorgan.com, a ton of information on there talking about this stuff. We have my book, Protecting Your Pets Against Parasites, that talks about all of this, the side effects, how to detox, symptoms of the different problems. And so those are resources that you could you can download any of that from our website, take it to them and say, I just appreciate it if you read this. I really like to start doing things differently. And so it's really just a matter of education without attacking them, kind of letting them know like, yeah, okay, and maybe we want to do this a little differently.
Thank you so much for going into detail with that, because it is so important to help educate about it. And I think something that a lot of pet parents are maybe a little wary about is to come off as like kind of like a conspiracy theorist or something. But to be honest with this topic, there's so much evidence that we can use and we can present to anyone really that is interested, or to anyone who we want to share that with to make a change. So we're definitely going to link a lot of resources for anyone listening. We're going to link a lot of resources into the description below and into the episode. Yeah, so we can all make a change together.
One dog at a time.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Judy, for taking the time today to talk to us about this incredibly important topic. I have faith that in the future, we will be able to see some regulatory changes, hopefully see these products off the market.
That would be an amazing thing if we could make that happen.
I'm just so grateful for veterinarians like you who do the research, do the surveys, bring the information out there, and be a voice for all of us pet parents. I'm very grateful for the work that you're doing, and thank you again for sitting with us today.
No problem.
If there's one thing I hope you're taking away today, it is this. Just because your dog has been fine on flea and tick medication doesn't automatically mean that it will always be like that. It simply means it's worth evaluating the risks and being thoughtful about what you choose next. If you'd like something clear and practical to sit with after this conversation, I created the complete flea and tick protection guide to walk you through the FDA warning, key references we discussed today, and it also includes natural flea and tick prevention option you can explore with your dog. It's free, it's linked below, and it's designed to give you clarity, not overwhelm. If you would like to continue learning from Dr. Judy directly, you can follow her at Dr. Judy Morgan on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And I've also linked her books, her work, and resources below in the description for you as well. And in the next episode, we continue this conversation in a way that brings practical direction to what we discussed today. I'll be sitting down with Julianne Lee to talk about what thoughtful, gentle detox support can look like for dogs who have previously used chemical flea and tick medications like Bravecto. If your dog has recently received a flea and tick medication and you're now wondering what you can do to help prevent adverse reactions, that next episode will be especially relevant for you. I'll see you in the next one.